A very good morning, everyone. A very good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Am I audible? A very good morning to everyone. I am Dr. Sunita Patil, representing Department of Pathology, DY Patil Medical College. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all the participants and guest speaker for today's pathology webinar, organized by Department of Pathology, DY Patil Medical College, Kolhapur. This webinar is basics of colonoscopic biopsy with potpourri of cases. I request Dr. Duffley to introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Sunita, for giving me the opportunity to introduce a versatile person like Dr. Anita P. Zawalgi. Dr. Anita P. Zawalgi has done her MBBS from Khaja Bandinawar Institute of Medical Sciences, Gulbarga, and her MD in Pathology from S. Nijalingappa Medical College, Bagalkot, with an outstanding performance. She has taken oncopathology training at the reputed Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. She has been awarded a PhD in medical pathology by Sri B.M. Patil University, Bijapur. She has many publications to her credit, and she is a speaker in many pathology conferences. She has received the Best Poster Award at IAPM Conference, Karnataka chapter in the year 2011. She has also received the Best Oral Paper at National Conference, Cytocon 2018. She has handled many research projects, and apart from that, she has also worked as a chairperson for the Committee for Women Empowerment at BLDE University for the year 2015. She still continues to be a member of the Women Empowerment Committee. She is a member of Cultural Committee for 5 years and was an active committee member during annual conferences conducted by different departments of BLD University. She has worked as a coordinator for NAAC at departmental level, and she is the convener for PhD committee at Sri DM University. Her main areas of interest are oncopathology and study of endoscopic intestinal biopsies. At present, she is working as a professor of pathology, SDM Medical College, Dharwad, Karnataka State. I'm sure all of us connected with her will enjoy her deliberation on the topic, Basics of Colonoscopic Biopsies with Potpourri of Cases. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Now I request our guest speaker, Dr. Anita Javalgi, to take over. Ma'am, now the stage is all yours. So after the talk, there will be a question QA session at the end. It will be for 10 minutes. In case you have got any queries related to the topic, you can drop your questions in the chat box. It will be taken up by the speaker at the end of the session. And as well, we are sharing a link in the chat box for feedback. At the end, please do give the feedback.
A very good morning. A very good morning to all. Thank you, Dr. Duffy, for such a sweet introduction. Without wasting time, I'll start up with my topic. This talk is mainly dedicated, or it is towards the postgraduates teaching. Before I start, I would like to greet the warm greetings from my university, that is Sri Dharmasthala Manjunatheshwara University. Basics of colonoscopic biopsies with potpourri of cases. As we all know, colonoscopy is to visualize the mucus of the terminal ileum, colon, and rectum. This is lower GI tract. And main purpose of colonoscopy is to check the macroscopic lesions, to screen the colorectal disease, to identify any inflammatory lesions, polyps, and neoplasms. Flexible fiber optic sigmoidoscopy and colonoscopy availability has revolutionized the diagnosis and management of colorectal diseases. So understanding the colonoscopic findings with pathological features of lower gastrointestinal lesions with correlation with clinical features becomes an essential tool for the management. So we have three important things: the clinical features, colonoscopic findings, and the pathological features to come up to the confirmed diagnosis for proper management. So what is the overall view of as we all know, GI tract is been lined by mucosa, submucosa, muscularis mucosae, and serosa. Mucosa has epithelium. Based on the lining, its functions vary. The lamina propria, which is composed of thin, loose connective tissue, and the muscularis mucosae, which has got two thin layers of muscle, followed by submucosa, muscularis propria. And the outer layer is the visceral peritoneum. Muscularis propria has two components of skeletal muscle at beginning and smooth muscle at the end, that is the inner circular and outer longitudinal layer over lower esophagus to rectum. So we know this basics of GI, but however, when we go to the colonoscopic biopsies, we must know the adequacy of the biopsy, orientation of the specimen, how to process this, and at the end, how to interpret it. So the basics is assessing any biopsy from GI tract. Most important factors which we look is age, race, sex of the patient, signs and symptoms, site of biopsy, endoscopic and radiological findings. History of drugs, alcohol is very important, and any other associated medical history. The technical aspects include the biopsy specimens obtained at the endoscopy consist only of the mucosa. Now remember that the biopsy which we receive consists of mucosa, its lamina propria, muscularis mucosa, and part of submucosa. If you see muscularis propria in the biopsy tissue, you immediately have to speak to the scopist because high chances of iatrogenic perforation can be seen in the patient. So in a biopsy, if it is up till submucosa part of it, then it is adequate. But if it crosses it and includes muscularis propria, then it's almost we are perforating the patient. So it also depends on the endoscopist skills. There are certain regions where the mucosa is very thickened. That time we can only obtain the superficial portion. Suction or aspiration type biopsy, more fruitful when a large sample or more exact location is required. Choice of fixative is also usually not critical, but be careful while using the fixatives. Usually we use the routine ones, but if you're using Goins, remember that they do interfere with the staining of the endocrine cells, that is the Paneth cells. Multiple sections are required to improve the chance of detecting focal or subtle changes. So how many sections are required? Once we receive a biopsy, you at least have 3 slides and each slide is having 5 sections. When focal lesion is not obtained, at least these 3 slides will help you out with the detecting of the lesions. And sometimes we can prefer cytological preparations from the mucosa because many of the infectious, you see the organisms in the mucosal lining. So you might choose, if you have got good biopsy, the mucosal imprint cytology. The ideal mucosal biopsy, at least we need 3 pieces of full thickness mucosa, that is 3 mm in length. Mucosal fragments should be well oriented at the time of bending. Now, how do you look at that? Either you can have it through a naked eye view, or use a magnifying lens. Try to identify the mucosa and then orient it on the filter paper so that you shouldn't lose the biopsy. And if it is very tiny biopsy, you can ink it with any marker. Eosin is commonly used. And make sure you place it in such a way that the technicians embed it in a proper oriented manner where you can see mucosa along with the beneath layers. If you place it vertical, then the only superficial mucosa you can see. So make sure you place the mucosa horizontally. And then you have processed the tissue, and then the slides come to you, and there the real our role come into play, where you have to look into the slides and arrive to a diagnosis correlating with colonoscopic findings. So today I will be focusing, as colonoscopic biopsy is a vast area where it includes non-neoplastic and neoplastic. So today let me include only neoplastic section as we have got less time. And in non-neoplastic, how to go about interpretation of non-neoplastic lesions of colonoscopy biopsy. So broadly, we all know we categorize any non-neoplastic lesions as infectious and non-infectious. Infections, again, we know it's bacterial, viral, parasitic, or fungal. Non-infections, the list is very lengthy in case of GI tract. And the most common is inflammatory bowel disease. Then we have microscopic colitis, which includes lymphocytic colitis and collagenous colitis, eosinophilic colitis, drug-induced colitis. Very important because these days, a lot of a lot of individuals come with a history of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, chemotherapy-induced change, long-term intake of paracetamol. So these also have changed. These drugs, long-standing intake of drugs, bring change in the flora of the intestine and then subsequently bring changes in the intestinal tissue. Then graft versus host disease, malabsorption syndrome are very common in small intestinal biopsies. Folliculitis, that is nothing but terminal ileitis, that is hyperplastic lymphoid follicle. Then mucosal prolapse common in left colon. We have a variable degree of mucosal prolapse from solitary rectal ulcer to the whole mucosal prolapse, cystatic profunda. Then the list continues in non-neoplastic lesions. Remember that scopic findings always help in confirming microscopic findings and yielding confirmed diagnosis. So I just discussed the adequacy of the biopsy, processing it, and while processing, be careful orienting the tissue, biopsy tissue, and once you receive, try to get 3 sections, five sections, 3 slides, 5 sections in each slide. And then we will continue with the non-neoplastic interpretation. Broadly, I've categorized as infectious and non-infectious. So before seeing the slide, we should be aware of normal colon biopsy histology. The colonoscopic biopsies mainly consist of left colon, right colon, and the terminal ileum part biopsies. So most commonly we get biopsies from the colon. So what are the basic differences of right colon and left colon? If we are aware of this, it is very easy to pick up the abnormal entities. So remember that right colon, the main function is more absorption. So it is the lining has more absorptive cells. Whereas left colon, the main function is lubrication. So more goblet cells are seen. Right colon lamina propria is more cellular. It has got many plasma cells, lymphocytes, eosinophils. Lymphoid aggregates are normally present. Macrophages are usually seen in aggregates in superficial lamina propria. No apoptosis is seen in right colon biopsies, and Paneth cells are very commonly seen in right colon. When we see the left colon, as I've mentioned, goblet cells are more in number. Lamina propria is less cellular, so there are very few eosinophils, and plasma cells are just placed beneath the surface epithelium. Lymphoid aggregates are common here also. So right and left colon, lymphoid aggregates doesn't make a difference. They are commonly seen. Macrophages are usually seen throughout the lamina propria. Now, very important is the surface apoptosis. Surface apoptosis is a normal finding in left colon biopsies. And if you find, you call it as abnormal if you find more than one apoptotic cell in 20 crypts. So ideally, a normal biopsy, we might get into 10 to 18 crypts. So it's very difficult on biopsy to commit an apoptosis. But where do we see this apoptosis? Usually graft versus host disease, viral infection causes, or drug-induced changes. And if you see any Paneth cells on the left colon, think that there is a metaplasia, and metaplastic change is usually seen in the chronic diseases. So this is a normal finding. And in terminal ileum, remember that apart from this, the crypt-villi ratio is important. Second, the presence of intraepithelial lymphocytes and lymphoid follicles are more in the terminal ileum. So when we consider lymphocytic inflammation of the ileum, be very careful because normally they have more lymphocytes. So this is a normal colonic mucosa where we can see the crypt. And while observing the slide, the normal crypts are uniformly placed. The space between two crypts is uniform. That is, the lamina propria is usually uniform. And there are very scant lymphoplasma cells seen. Very important factor when we are looking into the slide is first look at what is outside the mucosa. Is anything covering the mucosa? Is there an ulceration or exudate material? Lot of things or organisms we can find in the necrotic material or exudate which is above the mucosa. And then you look for the crypt architecture. Is there any distortion or any breakage of the crypt, branching of the crypt? Branching is, these all are changes of a chronic disease where you can see a simple crypt undergoes a branching because of regenerative change. And at the base, you should have a look for basal cell hyperplasia. And also the plasma cells are diffusely placed, lymphocytes and plasma cells. If the plasma cell clustering is seen at the base of the crypt, again, you have to be alert, thinking in the lines of IBD or any chronic disease. So this is normal mucosa. And most important is the reporting pattern or the checklist what we have to have. This is a busy slide, but I would like to go point wise so that you should have a checklist so that you do not miss on any point and you can arrive at the correct diagnosis. So the 3 important parts in the biopsy, colonoscopic biopsies, is mucosal epithelial features, lamina propria, muscularis mucosae, and part of submucosa if it is there. So in mucosal epithelial features, is the mucosa intact? Before that, is anything above the mucosa? Is there any exudate material or any excessive mucin lying over the mucosa? Has to be looked. Then the villous mucosal surface, whether it is normal, irregular, or villous. Is there any associated erosion? Left side colon, even a hard stool might cause a erosion. So if the patient is having constipation, finding a erosion in the left colon, you can correlate because of the hard stool. But in the other way around, if it is on the long history of drug intake or diarrhea, then the erosion has to be thought the underlying infectious or non-infectious causes. Ulceration, superficial, deep. Now, very important whether these ulcers are superficial or deep. Deep ulcers indicate chronic disease, usually seen in ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, and so. Neutrophils in surface epithelium, which we also called as epitheliitis or mucositis. Now, neutrophils, 1 or 2 is okay, but even if you find one neutrophil, sometimes with the associated features, you have to count it as and call it as epitheliitis or mucositis. So neutrophils in the surface epithelium indicates the acute inflammation, may be progressing to chronic inflammation. So it could be a feature of any infectious causes and IBD. Now, normal crypt architecture, which are loop-like present in the normal mucosa, it might undergo dilatation, branching, loss of parallelism, and the gap between the crypt basis and muscularis mucosae may be widened without the presence of lymphoid infiltrate. And it might show other inflammatory cells like lymphoplasma cells, eosinophils, histiocytes, granulomas, and so. So these are the features you have to see. Then intercrypt distance, whether it is widened. Then mucus content, whether it is normal, look for the goblet cells, whether there is hypoplasia of goblet cells, the mucin production, whether it is decreased or increased. Most of the tumors will have extracellular mucin or increased mucin activity, whereas decreased in chronic disorders, where it is a finding of ulcerative colitis, mucin depletion, and atrophy of glands is one more finding of ulcerative colitis. So you should identify the mucin production, whether it's normal, increased, or decreased. Hypoplastic epithelium. Now, mucosa sometimes undergo regenerative change, as we all know the basic mechanism, and they undergo hyperplasia. Few of them may develop into a dysplasia based on underlying pathology. So dysplasia are commonly seen associated with ulcerative colitis, viral induced inflammation, and usually in adenomas or intestinal polyps, which gives you a hint. If you find only dysplasia, talk to the scopist and try to know, is there any associated polyp, underlying ulcerative colitis, or a malignancy. Endocrine metaplasia or planet cell metaplasia, and again a feature of chronic lesions, and identifying this helps you. It is commonly seen in inflammatory bowel disease, and so. So these are the mucosal epithelial features. So remember that you have to look for crypt-villa ratio is important in ileal biopsies. In colon biopsies, you should look for the crypt, arrangement of the crypt, distortion, branching, intercrypt space, and widening of lamina propria. And if it is widened, it is filled with what? Moving on to lamina propria. Lamina propria, can you see the first thing? What I've can see? Okay. So inflammation cells, whether there are lymphocytes, plasma cells, distribution of this, chronic inflammatory infiltrate with plasma cells between bases of the crypts and muscularis mucosae. Excess of histiocytes, you have to identify these macrophages. And if you find it difficult, you can go with the special stain or IHC to identify the inflammatory cells. But as such, in colon biopsies, you don't need those special or ancillary techniques. On HND, we can pick it up. Excess of histiocytes in chronic inflammatory infiltrate, neutrophils in lamina propria, neutrophils in crypt epithelium. Now, please, can anybody, PG, tell me neutrophils in crypt epithelium is called as cryptitis. And neutrophils in the lumen of the crypt is called as cryptapsis. So there is, you have to look for cryptitis, presence of neutrophils in the lining crypt mucosa. If the 3 to 4 neutrophils are present in the lumen, think of cryptapsis. And whether there is specific location of this, that is basal neutrophil cryptitis or basal histiocytic cryptitis. Now, again, if basal histiocytic cryptitis is present, is it associated with eosinophil infiltration, which will hint you towards eosinophilic inflammation or parasitic infection? Associated giant cell, type of giant cell, and whether you see epithelioid granulomas. Now, in colonoscopic biopsies, a granuloma, you can term it as a granuloma if you find epithelioid cells, minimum 5 epithelioid cell cluster. You can call it as granuloma, a small granuloma. Above 5 epithelioid cells, then you can term it as granuloma, and macrogranuloma if more epithelioid cells are seen. Granulomas are very important. You have to look for location of the granuloma, whether it's a microgranuloma or macrogranuloma, and how are they placed, whether it's only in lamina propria or throughout the tissue. And associated, a granuloma, if it is only epithelioid granuloma without lymphocyte cuffing and present in the lamina propria, and if it has caseous necrosis, then you will think towards tuberculosis. If it is associated with lymphoid hyperplasia, cuffing of lymphoid cells around the lymphoid follicle, you'll think of Crohn's disease. These two are the entity where in our scenario, we face every alternate day colon biopsies, and it's a very difficult situation to call it Crohn's disease or tuberculosis. And based on your diagnosis, the whole management of the individual changes. Crohn's is the complete management and it is contra management for the tuberculosis. So you have to identify granulomas. If it is caseous, well and good, you can go with AFB stain. But if it is not caseous granuloma, there are various causes of granulomas. We have non-caseating granulomas in sarcoidosis. We have in Crohn's, fungal, drug-induced, foreign body, and tuberculosis. So make sure how the granuloma is. Again, I'll repeat, 5 epithelioid cells, you call it as granuloma in colon biopsies. So term it as microgranuloma. Macrogranuloma is more than 5 cells. And if look for surrounded by lymphoid, cuff of lymphoid cells present or absent, and how are they placed? If it's only in lamina propria, you think of tuberculosis, and if it's spread throughout till submucosa, you think of Crohn's disease. Microgranulomas are feature of Crohn's, whereas in tuberculosis, you feel a lot of granulomas, variable size, variable clustering of epithelioid cells, and spread only in the lamina propria. Then cryptapsis, I have told you, cystic cryptapsis, if they undergo cystic degeneration, location of the cryptapsis, and if you find a single giant cell, there's nothing but few inflammatory cells and single giant cell in your biopsy, then do take a history of drug. Drug-induced changes usually have 1 or 2 giant cells, or else if you have numerous giant cells, then the indication is different. Like you have to think in the line of tuberculosis or IBDs. And then the last is muscularis mucosae, that is normal or thickened. Now, role of muscularis mucosae is usually disturbed in mucosal prolapse cases, like solitary rectal ulcer syndrome or cystitis profunda, where the muscularis mucosa gets disturbed. They try to move around and form a cuffing or clustering around the glands of the lamina propria. So muscularis mucosae is disturbed in these conditions where there is commonly seen in the left colon, where there is mucosal prolapse. And second, muscularis mucosa undergoes thickening in cases of chronic diseases. But again, it's a feature of a Hirschsprung's where you see a lot of hypertrophy of these fibers, but not usually seen in non-neoplastic colon biopsy lesions. Submucosa, you might get few glands and just look for any inflammation of the glands. I hope you understood this checklist. This is very important and it will be very easy for you to arrive for an appropriate diagnosis. So this is the case of, I think this is the case of lymphocytic colitis. It's okay. So this is a case of colitis where we see a crypt basal hyperplasia, a diffuse lymphoplasma cell infiltration, and distortion of the crypt. Sorry, this is a case of infectious colitis where we make out, here are the neutrophils which we can see in the crypt. My pointer is pointing out at the neutrophils which are present in the mucosa, which is a feature of mucositis. And there is a basal cell hyperplasia. And diffuse lymphoplasma cell infiltration, and that scattered neutrophils are seen in lamina propria also. Now, infectious colitis is a very close DD for active ulcerative colitis. Both have overlapping features, both have cryptitis, cryptapsis, and mucin depletion. Sometimes if you are seeing atrophy of the glands, then you favor it as active ulcerative colitis. But bacterial colitis and active ulcerative colitis are very close DD. Most important is you have a with the scopus, that is the gastroenterologist, and take the history, whether it is acute diarrhea or chronic altered bowel habits, which again, acute diarrhea favors bacterial colitis, and chronic altered bowel habits favors ulcerative colitis. And also bacterial colitis, you can ask, less likely you will get stool culture correlation, stool culture or blood culture, if you find well and good. So remember that infectious or bacterial colitis or infectious colitis is close DD of active ulcerative colitis. So you have to be very careful signing out as infectious colitis. This is a case of collagenous colitis, that is the microscopic colitis. Microscopic colitis is usually seen in elderly individuals, and it is further categorized as lymphocytic colitis and collagenous colitis. The most common is complaints are pain, abdomen, and diarrhea, on and off diarrhea. And what we see is you term it as collagenous colitis if you see the subepithelium of the mucosa showing pink eosinophilic deposit. Ideally, subepithelium has a thin pink band, which is 3 to 4 micron meters of width. But if you see a more obvious eosinophilic deposit around the glands and below the mucosa, you have to think of collagenous colitis entity, and they say if the thickness is above 5 micron meter, then you can term it as collagenous colitis. Also remember, in the processing, if the tangential section is taken, and eosine staining sometimes mimic a loose connective tissue of lamina propria, if it takes pink over eosine staining, it mimics collagenous colitis. So be careful. You can take the help of special stains before diagnosing it as collagenous colitis. So remember, in collagenous colitis, apart from inflammatory changes, the thickness of the collagen should be more than 5 micron meters. Lymphocytic colitis is another entity. We all know in colon, we have intraepithelial lymphocytes scattered. So arriving at particular number of lymphocytes per hyperfield is always a debate. Few take 20, few take 10, few take 50. But you remember that when it comes to ileum, your approach to that will be different when you look comparative to the colon biopsies. So in colon biopsies, finding 1 or 2 lymphocytes is fine. But if you find more than 10, definitely you should think in the line of inflammation, chronic inflammation, and if old age, think of lymphocytic colitis. The important in lymphocytic colitis is intraepithelial lymphocytosis, diffuse lamina propria widening, and infiltration of lymphoplasma cells, and lymphoid aggregates hyperplasia also is same. So those were the colon, few of the entities which I've discussed, non-infectious entities. Infectious entities I'll be discussing with later on, and the same cases I had shared with you all. So before that, a small note on small intestinal biopsies. We look the abnormality is present or no. If there is no specific changes, think of celiac disease, tropical sprue, bacterial overgrowth, cow's milk allergy, chronic renal failure, and multivitamin deficiency. If you find specific change in epithelium, lamina propria, you have to think in these lines. If there is a change in epithelium like mucositis, erosion, ulcer, as we discussed in the checklist, think of infections like virus, parasites, bacteria, sometimes even fungus. And the non-neoplastic entities, again, you can think of lymphocytic ileitis. Most commonly we come across is the terminal ileitis, which is also called as lymphoid folliculitis, which is nothing but a lymphoid hyperplasia. Beta lipoproteinemia, microvillus inclusions, graft versus host disease, and AIDS enteropathy. And lamina propria changes, again, infections you have to keep in the mind. Inflammatory causes like IBD, granulomatous inflammation, where you have differentials of tuberculosis, drug-induced, viral, fungal, and collagenous colitis. We just discussed the slide of collagenous colitis. Eosinophilic colitis. Remember, eosinophils are ideally more common in normally seen in right colon, but you should know where the eosinophils are present. They are present in the lamina propria. If the eosinophils start appearing in the mucosa, in the lumen of the gland. Think of eosinophilic causes. Eosinophilic enteritis or eosinophilic colitis itself is an entity, or you have to rule out parasitic infections. Immunodeficiency, HIV-induced changes, autoimmune enteropathy. Then metabolic, remember that these days we have every third patient diabetic. So remember that metabolic changes, long-standing diabetic individuals, you should have in your the systemic disorders in your mind. And whenever you are screening a colonoscopic biopsies, if you find a pink eosinophilic geographical areas in lamina propria, do stain for amyloid, rule out amyloidosis. And storage disorders and neoplasms. Of course, I'm not covering neoplasms in today's. So this is the small intestinal approach for the small intestine. So the hallmark of this small talk was the diagnosis of colitis requires evidence of injury to the epithelium. Remember that without seeing mucosal injury, mucositis or epithelitis, you cannot term it as colitis or enteritis, and not simply a mild increase in inflammatory cell in lamina propria. So diagnosis of colitis requires evidence of injury to the epithelium and not simply a mild increase in inflammatory cell in the lamina propria. And the very favorite non-specific colitis, as we say in pap smear, try to avoid giving ascus. It is not going to yield anything to the clinician. Similarly, in case of colonoscopic biopsies, try to avoid giving non-specific colitis because it is not going to yield anything to the clinicians, but we will be irritating them. So make sure non-specific colitis or non-specific enteritis to be very lessly placed, or 1 in 100, like as we follow the same standard rules for pap smear, 1 in 100 we can give ascus. That's the limitation. So here also non-specific colitis is given only when there is no traceable etiology and no characteristic features found. Sometimes Scopus might not reach the site of lesion and might have the biopsy done, which could be a non-representative or it could be inadequate. In those cases, you say it as non-representative. If you don't want to hurt the sentiments, then you can say it is non-specific colitis. But make sure don't prefer giving non-specific colitis in your signing out of reports. So moving on to, we just had a small study of 2 years at our institute at SDM Medical College, where we studied infection-induced inflammation of scopic biopsies. We tried to identify the infectious causes and non-infectious causes of scopic biopsies. This was our study of 2-year cross-sectional study, and to identify that and also to see the association with HIV. So in 2 years of span, we had 673 biopsies. And I just want to highlight that non-neoplastic and neoplastic are almost equally divided. So we also received non-neoplastic huge number, and 311 non-neoplastic biopsies where we saw 234 cases were non-inflammatory bowel disease. So we had to review these cases and come to a conclusion to categorize into infectious and non-infectious. Non-infectious includes microscopic, drug-induced, melanosis coli, and so on. And 24 cases were confirmed IBD, and 53 were excluded based on the inadequacy of report, inadequacy of the biopsy or representative biopsy. So out of 234 non-inflammatory bowel disease scopic biopsies, the maximum biopsies were done from the colon, which accounted for 48%. And then we tried to identify the infectious causes, bacterial, viral, fungal, parasite, and we found, and others. We found 75 cases. I'll be just discussing on the lower GI, 75 cases of bacterial cause. And majority of them we correlated with the stool culture. Pediatric cases, it's easy to get stool culture, but in adults, it's very difficult to get stool culture. But we try to get stool culture association with this for confirming bacterial colitis. And secondly, if not available, then the blood culture. And thirdly, only on microscopic findings. So we categorized before claiming it as bacterial. We tried our best to correlate with other parameters. And finally, or the microscopic findings. Then we had viral, parasite, and others were 62, which included other non-neoplastic cases, non-IBD and non-infectious causes, which included microscopic and drug-induced, melanosis coli, and so on. So again, the highlighting point in this study was infectious causes are more than non-infectious causes. So we try to we have a lengthy checklist. So we try to have a very common features which we could see in the colon biopsy. So we try to identify how many cases were showing ulcerative changes, how many cases were having necrosis, granulation tissue, inflammatory cells in the mucosa, lamina propria inflammation grading, then associated endothelial hypertrophy, which hints you towards some infection, angiogenesis association, and hypertrophy. Now, endothelial hypertrophy vascular thing has to be looked into to arrive at few diagnoses like ischemic colitis or viral, that is CMV. See, we notice that the inflammation, of course, we see inflammation in maximum cases in lamina propria and mucositis, but we also noticed there was 36% of necrosis seen. So we concluded that, I would be discussing the interesting slides. We concluded in this study that non-infectious, non-inflammatory bowel disease, infectious non-inflammatory bowel disease are more in colonoscopy biopsy, followed by non-infectious causes and then the malignancy. And also the HIV status, 10 to 20%, I think 18% association with HIV status we got, where we found infectious causes. So these are the interesting slide. I have included certain upper GI also. This was a case of non-immunocompromised individual with HSV esophagitis, where we can see a multinucleated giant cells with a proper classical nuclear ground glass appearance. Both the nuclear inclusions and cytopathic effect can be appreciated. And this was a case we tried to get the details. It was immunocompetent individual, which was surprisingly, and in such case, this is self-limiting. We need not worry much for herpes simplex infection in such cases. Second case, we all come across H. pylori day in and out. This was a case of CMV gastritis, where we see the inclusions. Now, CMV has got a classical, beautiful looking big cell with a prominent eosinophilic nucleoli. That's nothing but the cytopathic effect we see. They have affinity towards mucosal cells, endothelial cells, and macrophages. So if you see such kind of a big cell with the, looking at you, eosinophilic large body, then you either in mucosa or endothelial cells, you should think of CMV and go ahead with the IHC. We do have CMV IHC in our institute, so we confirmed it by IHC. This is a second case of fungus. This was a case of post chemo treatment of esophageal cancer, which turned out to have a fungal candidial infection, where we can see the surface, the mucosa itself is flooded with the hyphae. This is the case of CMV colon, which I have shared the same case with you all. I think slide 3, which was having lots of granulation tissue. Remember that when you see a slide with lots of granulation tissue, angiogenesis or hypertrophied endothelium, you have to go deeper and deeper sections, and please rule out CMV. It's very rampant, but we don't pick it up easily because it mimics hypertrophic endothelial cell also. A hypertrophic endothelial cell sometimes might disturb you, and as a CMV viral cell, then you can use the help of IHC CMV. So this is a case of CMV which I have shared with you. And this is the case of strongyloids. That is, I guess, second slide which I shared with you, where we can see a beautiful X in the mucosal glands. And in the first slide, I had not noticed this, but I had observed there were a lot of infection. It was just my intuition, for which I had asked for deeper. We are used to writing deeper for all the biopsies, isn't it? Just not to miss something. So by that thing, I just wrote deeper, and these were appearing in the second slide. After that, we started, going for 2 or 3 slides. It's all a learning process. This is favorite of all of us, that is a granulomatous tuberculosis infection, which is highlighting the AFB stain, is highlighting the acid-fast bacilli. One thing in GIT, getting acid-fast bacilli is very rare. You don't get that frequently as we get in lung biopsies or pleural effusion fluids. But if you find well and good, it's a straightforward case. Then what next? If you think it is granulomatous inflammation favoring tuberculosis and you don't find AFB, don't find non-caseating necrosis, please sign it out with a note saying that do TB-PCR. That will confirm their diagnosis. We forget to mention that, and the clinician, the gastroenterologist will have all the differentials of granulomatous, though they start empirical AKT on a safer side. But if they start AKT and if it turns to be Crohn's, it will worsen. And if they think Crohn's and start steroids and other immunotreatment, it will worsen tuberculosis. So be very careful when you sign off any granulomatous inflammation. And the last very interesting case, again, this slide I have shared with you. I think both the cases I have shared with you. The beautiful trophozoites, which is seen outside the lumen, entangled in the exudate, and those are Entamoeba histolytica. This is the slide I have taken from the Google. I didn't find any cryptosporidiosis in my experience. These are nothing but the pink basophilic inclusions which are adherent to the mucosa epithelium. So I would like to share the before going for potpourri of cases, the approach to the biopsies. Initially, I discussed the adequacy, the processing, the normal histology, few non-neoplastic entities where you categorize infectious and non-infectious, and finally, how to go about. A beautiful article I found, which was just recently published, which will help you. So you have a checklist, a very short checklist you prepare, where you can look into these entities. So let us start. You're looking into the slide. There is mucosa, lamina propria, and mucosa muscularis mucosa. It's visible. And you see there's a lot of inflammation. And again, in inflammation, fight above cells, you'll see eosinophils, neutrophils, lymphocytes, plasma cells, and the histiocytes. If these are very obvious, then you categorize and already see the associated lesions. If it is neutrophil predominant, or it is having any architectural distortion. Now, if there is no inflammation, but you see architectural distortion, that is the crypt distortion. Crypts are not loop-wise uniformly arranged. If they are distorted, there is branching, there is breakage, there is basal hyperplasia. And at the base of the crypt, if you see clustering of plasma cells, then you think of IBD. If there is no architectural distortion or no plasmacytosis, no inflammation, then you have to think of neoplasia, amyloid, or any other cause. Amyloid, again, if you see pink eosinophilic material, go for the amyloid stain. Usually old age, chronic disorders, think of it and have one stain for amyloid. And now if there is neutrophil present in the tissue, and if it is not predominant, it's very few neutrophils, but you see lymphocyte predominant slide, then try to look for any intraepithelial lymphocytosis. If intraepithelial lymphocytosis is present, look for subepithelial collagenoses. As we know, intraepithelial lymphocytosis, two entities, that is microscopic colitis or microscopic enteritis. So if subepithelial collagenoses is present, think of lymphocytic colitis, but here the collagen band will be less than 5 micron meters. The collagen band thickness will be less than 5. And you have to go for the special stains to confirm trichrome stain or any collagen stain. Collagenous colitis, where it is more than 5 microns, usually they will be 10 micron. It's very obvious in the slide. And drug-related colitis. If there is no subepithelial collagenosis and there is intraepithelial lymphocytosis, think of infectious colitis or IBD. Now, intraepithelial lymphocytes are absent. And if there is architectural distortion or plasmacytosis, again IBD is closed, and diverticular colitis is another entity. Absence of intraepithelial lymphocytosis, presence of lymphocyte, and absence of distortion and plasmacytosis, think of drug-induced colitis or infectious again. The lymphocyte predominant, look for the granulomas. If they're present, sarcoidosis or IBD. If they're absent, look for the eosinophils. If they're present, there are quite differentials for eosinophil predominant cases, and mast cell disorder if there are no eosinophils. Remember, eosinophils are commonly seen in right colon and ileum, left colon less likely. If they are present, then there are a lot of differential diagnosis. So they are seen in IBD, they are seen in infectious colitis, they are seen in non-infectious colitis, a lot big list, but try to correlate with other associated features. And then that's the rule of exclusion. You term it as eosinophilic colitis or enteritis when you rule out other causes. So this is one where we have discussed of architectural distortion and lymphocyte predominant. What if there is neutrophil predominant? If there is a neutrophil predominant, associated architectural distortion and basal plasmacytosis and granulomas are seen, think of IBD and infectious colitis. No granulomas, apoptosis. Again, apoptosis is normally seen in left colon, but if it is a right colon or ileum, think of entities like radiation-induced IBD, infectious colitis. Now, IBD apoptosis are very less likely. If there is a history of radiation and if there is a history of long-standing drug intake, then you can look for apoptosis. So the apoptosis, if they are just placed on the mucosa, then again you consider it as normal. But if it reaches the base of the crypt, it is abnormal. Apoptosis is absent, then you think of these entities of IBD, diverticular colitis, diversion colitis, and ischemic colitis. Ischemic colitis is another one entity which we miss on our routine cases, but we do encounter ischemic colitis. So it's an overlooked entity, but you have to have a look. Usually ischemic colitis is secondary to malignancy, hypertension-induced changes sometimes, or chronic acute ischemia. They might lead to ischemic colitis. And granulomatous inflammation, if it is absent, There is no plasmacytosis, and you see pseudomembranes. Remember from UGV, remember one entity of pseudomembranous colitis caused by Clostridium difficile. That is, yes, that has to be a first differentials, but it can also be seen in other entities like ischemic colitis. It's a very close DD. Pseudomembrane are formed in ischemic colitis also. Less likely in infectious, less likely in drug-induced or IBD, but pseudomembranous two DDs. One is Clostridium difficile colitis and ischemic colitis. And lastly, the fibrosis. Fibrosis, where do you look for fibrosis is in the muscularis mucosae. If it undergoes fibrosis, these are the causes, that is radiation-induced diversion colitis, ischemic colitis. I forgot to mention of epithelioid cell granulomas, which are the mimickers. One is the endothelial cell clustering. While taking a section, if the section is tangential and the capillary is little tangentially cut, the endothelial cells just look like 3-4 endothelial cells in a cluster, like which mimics epithelioid cell. So that is not epithelioid cell, it's just a mimicker. And second is the fibroblast. Long-standing cases of muscularis mucosae, if it turns out to be fibroblast, 2-3 fibroblast, which will mimic like a epithelioid cell. So remember that, are you really looking into granuloma, or it is an endothelial hypertrophy clustering, or it is a fibroblast fibrosis? And they have a differentials. So this was the case of, this was the approach of colonoscopic biopsies. And these were the diagnosis of the cases which I had shared. I had shared the slides also. The first case which I shared with you was amoebiasis. I couldn't discuss with you because of shortage of time, but directly I've placed up the diagnosis. Second case is strongyloids. Third is granulomatous, which was confirmed tuberculosis. Fourth was CMV, a little difficult because there's a lot of vascular there, a lot of blood vessels and all. But if you keen, there's one CMV present over there. Third is enterobius vermicularis. This is like, once you enter first year of PG, in the first month, you get this slide. Somebody will show you enterobius vermicularis, which you'll never forget. Bacterial colitis is a very challenging case as it is a mimicker for active colitis, and the age group, again, they are overlapping. Bacterial colitis, again, in the middle age group, ulcerative colitis in middle age group. So that is one challenging there. So that case I had discussed in the slide which I have shared with you. There is cryptitis, cryptapsis, but it is not uniformly divided. Cryptitis and cryptapsis, I think 1 or 2 glands are showing. Okay, that favors bacterial. If it was involving many glands, it would have favored cryptitis and cryptapsis. If it was more, it would have favored IBD. Then 7th and 8th, though they were not GIT, but I was very fond of this to share with you, that is molluscum contagiosum and aspergillosis with maggots. Now you might have picked up maggots, but you have not picked up aspergillosis. It's always in a post-graduation. If we find one finding, it's like a eureka moment for us. We don't look for the second findings. So always remember, there's a lot in the slide. Whenever you find necrosis, please look for organisms. And there are different type of necrosis. If you should know to pick up that. If it is exudative, pus-like, that is coagulative necrosis and inflammatory association, look for the organisms. If it is tumor necrosis, you need not bother. If it is fibrinoid necrosis, you need not bother. If it is a fibrinoid necrosis, you look into vascular entities, isn't it? So if it is caseous necrosis, it's a straightforward. Coagulative necrosis and a lot of inflammation, look for the organisms, okay? So that case, maggots you might have picked, but aspergillosis is also finding there, where you find a thin, slender hyphae with acute angle, a standard description of aspergillosis. So these were the cases which I shared with you. I hope you have all gone through. Has anybody picked up CMV? Okay. That same slide I had put up in the slide, and we have next discussion as such. So this was my short discussion on approach to basics of colonoscopic biopsies. So my suggestion is to have a checklist and then arrive for the diagnosis, and always talk and to the scopist or the gastroenterologist and find the scopic findings. Though I have not discussed the scopic appearances, but you should be aware of them. So very interesting part. I expect even the seniors to take part in this potpourri of cases. Case 1, this is a very interesting encounter during my postings only. A female 57-year-old, pain in lower abdomen, insidious in onset and gradually progressive. So HEMAT sero biochemical analysis were normal, HIV was negative, biopsy was done, turned out to be adenocarcinoma. Till now, it was a straightforward case. Radiological findings favored malignancy. So it has a large intestinal dilated and fluid filled with multiple air fluid levels, indicating bowel obstruction. CT scan also showed circumferential wall thickening involving descending colon and distal half of transverse colon. So she landed up, though it was a case of adenocarcinoma, before the planning, she landed up with acute obstruction and it was an emergency laparotomy. So when we got the specimen, we knew it's a case of carcinoma. So directly our eyes went into the carcinoma entity. And we see the thickening and we see a minor growth here, the gross appearance. So it's a straightforward case of adenocarcinoma. So we have a protocol of grossing where we give 3 bits from tumor, then adjacent mucosa, then the junction. And always in normal adjacent mucosa, we don't find anything, very less likely. But in this case, there was very interesting. Now I'll go for that. Can you appreciate the low power and high power of adenocarcinoma? Is it straightforward? Yes. So next, what we observed in the adjacent mucosa, initially one section we give, and there were a lot of ulcers, and there was a granulation tissue. This was the picture. Then we regrossed few more sections, and everywhere we found this. There is a lot of granulation tissue, widening of lamina propria, erosion of the mucosa. There is, abnormal necrosis and all. What makes you think, what hint you get by looking at this picture? Postgraduates. Exactly. So I started wondering, my junior faculty, in a very nice CAP protocol, he wrote the report and he kept it on my table. And then he said, ma'am, there are a lot of ulcers, nothing much. And of course, for his experience, there are very common chances of missing on CMV. And then what we found was CMV. A very beautiful endothelial cell is showing the inclusion. Can you appreciate that, the arrow? And this is little very obvious. And then we started looking for it. And we confirmed with the IHC, where we can see a beautiful viral CMV. So this was a case of CMV with adenocarcinoma. Again, don't have a eureka moment when you see one entity. There is adenocarcinoma, well and good, but a lot of ulcers were there. Try to find out the cause of it. And CMV, definitely the management along with chemo. As we know, a surgical APR is done and then they go with 3 to 4 cycles of chemo. And then CMV, when you say, they definitely go on with the gangliocyclovir. So this is very important. You mentioned, if you miss CMV, definitely the patient will deteriorate or it will flourish, flare up. So this was the case of CMV with adenocarcinoma. Okay, gear up for the second case. 48-year female, pain abdomen since few months, which aggravated after intake of food. Loss of weight and fever since few days. Now blood parameters and urine analysis was within normal limits. Then a scopic, they found an ulcerated fibril growth at 80 centimeters from anal verge, which was obliterating the lumen, and it suggested malignancy. So again, this looks like a straightforward case till now. Then the biopsy was done. Now, can you comment on this? This is a very tiny fragment where we see some bad looking, angry looking cells. More, okay, the basic concept in H&D slides, if it is more blue, you think of sarcomas or malignancies or endometrium. Lymphoid. More of pink, non-malignancies. This is a very basic, So here we see a lot of blue cells, lot of pleomorphism. Okay. So do you think it is malignancy? Is it malignant? Yes. What kind of malignancy? Colon, we expect adeno, signet, mucinous, but does it fit into that? So what you want to place at this right now on the biopsy, what would you like to sign it out as? Postgraduates. Yes, malignancy, yes, but we want to add something for that. Is it differentiated, undifferentiated, pleomorphic, anaplastic? What comes to your mind when you look for such a bizarre cells? Is that an entity? Okay, that is hide in this, sorry. So we gave it as undifferentiated carcinoma, pleomorphic carcinoma, and one more entity which is very favorite of GIT, non-epithelial tumor. CD117 is a marker. Yes? Yes. GIST. CD117, So GIST is the one which you have to keep in differential diagnosis when such kind of bizarre appearing, undifferentiated tumors you see. Most of the times they come up with a malignant GIST. But in this case, we went with the IHC, CK7, CK20. Can you tell me why we do CK7, CK20? Exactly. CK7 positive in upper, 20 in lower. CD34, if any, least possibility of angiosarcoma. Less likely, but this is very bizarre. Though I cannot focus all this view of the slide, but it was few areas were looking like angiosarcoma. Then CD30 again for that. Then Vimentin to rule out any smooth muscle tumors. EMA, S100 for any S100 for any neural differentiation, neural tumors. SMA again for smooth muscle. Desmin, PAN-CK, CDA117. And very at the end, when everything came out, we put P63. Can you tell me what the P63 is commonly? Okay, commonly it's a myoepithelial marker for breast and for prostate, but sometimes even the squamous epithelial cells pick up P63. Squamous cells pick up P16, P50, P63 based on the sites. Okay, if it is oral, then P50 is P50 is a very vague marker, but sometimes it helps you in the diagnosis. So P63 was the one with the last, when everything turned out to be not favoring, then one of my senior faculty suggested, let us go with P63, very unlikely. So P63 turned out to be very nicely positive. Now you will think of squamous cell carcinoma in colon. Is it a common tumor? No. Uncommon, but our patient is female. So then you'll count whether it was a metastasis or it is de novo. Very rare we find de novo. Then we received hemicolectomy specimen of the same. This was in the biopsy where we gave undifferentiated pleomorphic gist, but we knew it was SCC, but we were not confident enough on biopsy to call it as SCC because they would have gone in shock. Colon SCC, how is it possible? So we waited for it. Though we had ISAs and we didn't reveal that. We just gave 3-4 differentials and we waited for the hemicolectomy specimen to be more sure while placing this diagnosis. So this is a very classical hemicolectomy specimen where we see the growth and definitely it is malignancy. And then this is the very better picture. Did you find any kind of, okay, this is a low power view, which is looking like any SCC, isn't it? If it is oral or cervical, keratinizing. And high power, we can see this keratinization of the cells. So keratinizing tumor is visible on hemicolectomy, which was missed on the biopsy. Biopsy was more like this third slide, very bizarre cell. So now we were very sure. Though we had on biopsy, we were very sure and we signed it out as a. So just to share you with the CK picture, the ISC pictures, this is CK20. The internal control is positive, but tumor is negative. CK7, whole thing is negative, so it confirms low GI. P63 is markedly positive, and this is the stromal component Vimentin is positive. So this confirms our diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma. So this was primary squamous cell carcinoma after discussing and ruling out other entities. Okay, so such challenges we face where the biopsy is one phase, trailer is different and movie is different, something like that. Moving on to the third case, this is very old case of mine. And my first boss had arrived with this diagnosis, but I would like to share this. 8-year-old boy, pain abdomen 4 days, fever, vomiting, routine complaints of a child. On examination, patient was drowsy, irritable, febrile, and showed mild abdominal distension. On peripheral smear and hemat, the eosinophils were raised. So now you'll start thinking pediatric eosinophilia and abdominal, something in the lines of parasites. Then absolute eosinophil count was raised. And this case, usually there was thickened and edematous bowel loops and there was mild ascites and acute intestinal obstruction emergency. Laparotomy was done. Where the laparotomy, the tissue, the intestine had undergone a lot of gangrenous change. So can you say what are the causes of gangrenous intestine in pediatric age group? Most common, interception or volvulus. In adults, mesenteric thrombosis. Okay, hypertensive patient coming with intestinal obstruction, gangrenous. Definitely you look for what? The sections more of mesenteric vessels, isn't it? You'll try to look for the thrombosis. Microthrombi and many vessels you find. So that is how you rule out the gangrenous causes you try to identify. So this was a kid, gangrenous intestine, eosinophils were raised. So this is a very classical gangrenous intestine. And then the low power, lot of reaction, lot of granulation tissue, inflammation, exudate. And this in the first sections, there was nothing coming out, only inflammation. Sometimes everybody have a gut feeling that something else is there in this slide. Our lot of intuitions work in our practice. So we went for the deeper. Can you see something over here? A slender thing. So what could it be? Fungus, bacteria, parasite? Could be artifact or a parasite, yes. And again, you see something oval shaped. Okay. A very, it couldn't be a gland because there is no lumen. I'll just go for the high power. And there's a hooklet, a beautiful hookworm and the egg. So this was a case of hookworm infestation, which landed up in obstruction and gangrene. Very less like, now how could the gangrene or obstruction happen? There was extensive reply or response of a tissue. There was extensive granulation tissue, lymphoid hyperplasia, pediatric age group, abundant lymphoid hyperplasia, or what do you say, arrogant lymphoid hyperplasia will land up with obstruction. Okay, so this patient at cases at the ileum had an intestinal obstruction because of lymphoid hyperplasia and excessive granulation tissue overgrowth. And this was a case of hookworm infestation. Okay, that was how we confirmed this case. Very interesting case this was. And I think pediatricians published also. We couldn't publish it. And the last case of today's session, this is again interesting. Pain abdomen, 50-year-old, this was last year we encountered this case. 50-year-old man, pain abdomen, loss of appetite and mass for abdomen. In GIT, the symptoms are very vague, okay? And it's the scopic findings which will really help you. History of weight loss was significant and history of abdominal trauma present. Now, history of weight loss, you will start thinking in an old age could be a malignancy or it could be anemia of chronic disease. There was no any other significant history except he was case of chronic liver disease. And cirrhosis, they had not confirmed it. There was pancytopenia and hepatosplenomegaly was present, and radiological investigations revealed ill-defined heterogeneous enhancing soft tissue lesion with lot of necrotic areas. And this thickening was starting from duodenum, cuffing the duodenum, then extending to intestine and the hemicolon. So they thought it could be a malignancy. And they diagnosed it as malignancy and the laparotomy was done. Clinical diagnosis, they thought this is carcinoma, and surgical hemicolectomy with iliotransverse anastomosis was done, and we received the specimen. Now this specimen, when we cut open, I'm sorry, I don't have the unopened specimen pic. This is a cut open specimen. In the first look, does it look like a tumor? Could be with associated inflammation, but a lot of yellowish areas are there. So exudate, so could be some inflammatory lesion also. So routinely we grossed it as CAP protocol for considering it as malignancy only, thinking this whole thing is tumor. And now let's discuss, let's come to this slide. Remember the history, there is a history of abdominal trauma for the patient, okay? So there are lot of neutrophilic abscesses surrounded by histiocytes and lymphocytes. So there are huge granulomas with central neutrophilic collection surrounded by histiocytes, giant cells, epithelioid cells, and all the cells of inflammation and fibroblast. And this is another where we see multinucleated giant cells. And something which is very clearly seen is some structures are seen. Okay. Now you'll think of fungus. Can you see this clear fungus which has, it's a slender, it is not pseudo, I mean, it doesn't have IPA or angulation. This is the GMS stain which has highlighted the fungus. Okay, so this was a fungus which we were not sure what it is. What kind of a fungus we'll expect in intestine? Candida, Asper, Mucor. It wasn't fitting in that morphology. So we had to get the books, and there are a lot of abscesses. So one thing, we immediately called the surgeon and we told it is not malignancy, but we need some time. It is non-malignant, so we need more time. So a lot of neutrophilic abscesses are there, and these fungal structures are seen in one or two these granulomas. Now this, we were not sure what it is. Then again, we referred it to my senior faculty. And then she came up, the importance of history is very important. That is why we say we should start with the history. The patient had a history of abdominal trauma. Yeah, I'll get back to that. So that was one, and he was a case of chronic liver disease, immune compromised, pancytopenia. So this is one picture. So you stuck onto this fungi. So we have one fungus, and then we have this picture, this favorite granulation tissue, which favors CMV. So we have CMV also, and very beautiful, obvious looking CMV is there. So we had CMV also in this case. So we have a CMV confirmed, but that fungus we were not sure. We had ARAD for one morphology entity, and we sent the sample for serology, CMV as well as fungus. It turned out to be CMV with basidobolomycosis. It's a very rare entity. It's a subcutaneous fungal infection seen in trauma patient, but we found it. So where were these abscesses? Now the question arises, how did it reach from abdomen subcutaneous to intestines? Actually, these all abscesses were present in the outside layer of serosa. Mucosa was ulcerated, showing CMV. Serosa and the mesentery was showing this. That's why I'll get back to the gross. Nothing was clear. You can see the whole mucosa inside, outside, adhesions are there, exudate is there. The whole immune response is complexed here. Can you see that? So the gross picture, which these all were seen in outside layer and mesenteric tissue, which confirmed basidobolomycosis, which is rare entity. And this was very interesting case. We haven't published it, but I felt like I should share this. So I hope this made your day. This case, especially CMV with basido, we have in literature only 130 cases reported in intestinal wall. So that ends my talk. Any questions? Before I go up to the question answer session, I would like to thank my department headed by Dr. Vidisha Atnikar, our registrar, Dr. Dinesh Chandra sir, and my postgraduate, Dr. Sailesh, who helped out me with the study, and Dr. Basavaraj and Aditya, who helped with me the audio visual techniques, with the photographs and all. Thank you so much. I took exactly 1 hour.
Now the session is open for question and answers. Any questions? You can unmute yourself and you can ask, or else you can raise your hand.
Somebody has raised their hand. Sir. Ulcerative colitis. Resolving ulcerative colitis, you mean, sir? IBD. Huh. Sir, Panicil metaplasia will favor resolving in some later stage of IBD than non-specific. If you see Panicil, definitely chronic process takes place, and if it is left colon biopsy, the site, and resolving ulcerative colitis, the ulcerative colitis active and chronic stage. In chronic, again, we have divisions. So it favors IBD. And one more thing, while signing out IBD, you cannot straightforwardly say it's ulcerative or Crohn. Always prefer saying that it is IBD, which favors over what? Like ulcerative favoring, it favors ulcerative over Crohn's, favors Crohn's over ulcerative. This is how you prefer, so that it will be easy for the clinicians. So I think the Panicil is more commonly seen in ulcerative colitis, chronic stage. Yes. So non-specific will not have metaplasias. It will not have. So if still ask them to rule out IBD, sir. Yes. Sir.
And coming to amoebic colitis, we could see those over there. What I feel, we could have stained them in special stain if possible.
We could, sir. We could. Definitely special stains help for a PG teaching. Definitely it is a good suggestion, sir. We didn't do special stain for this case. It was obvious and for PG teaching, yes, we would have encouraged special stain. IBD and? I didn't get it. Okay. the serum protein biochemistry. So we have to correlate. But exactly, I haven't much gone into the biochemical analysis for IBD cases. I'll have to go and get back. No, sir. I did speak to the gastroenterologist regarding this COVID BAPSis, I mean, colonic BAPSis in post-COVID cases. They have done it, but significantly a classical fovea site, which we see in COVID, I didn't encounter, sir. It was an aggravation of underlying this thing, or very not classical fovea site. I've seen lung BAPSis also. We didn't find, sir. We got one autopsy, which we didn't knew the COVID status, and later on turned out to be the lung BAPSis showing classical findings of COVID. So we have to confirm it by RT-PCR, the BAPS, the blocks. We are under the process of it. It's not my unit case, somebody else's. So,
Does your institute have any protocol for reporting the colonic biopsy?
ma'am, the checklist. Yes, ma'am. We have not standardized it, but our unit, we work in unit system. We have discussed it, and the checklist which I had put up, madam, we have just shortened it and we use that. And we always mention the negative findings also, ma'am, which is not there. Always it helps. And when we, after a month or 15 days, we forget that slide or case, and somebody comes up here and asks about the case. So always when we go back, if we see the negative findings which we have not seen, you will remember the case, what it is, and you'll be very confident to say what was there and what was not there.
And what are the limitations of a endoscopy? Some limitations.
Maybe there's very small, very
You are guided, there is a source of light over
so
there.
even we write so many times, repeat the biopsy, it's not representative. But when we look at the patient, it's a very, the procedure itself is very traumatizing for the patient. It's a 3 hours procedure, endoscopy. For them, it's a half an hour, but the whole preparation of the patient and scopic itself, the patient is very uncomfortable. And over that, when we it's not representative, believe me, we'll have tough times, sir. We do face that.
Yeah, as sir asked, again the same question sort of. We don't find either the regions that
Non-specific.
Yeah. At least that 100 only can give us non-specific.
Yes,
values or condition.
Now we will find something. I'm very sure because when I joined as junior faculty, it's very common for us. If I'm not finding, our IC is what our mind knows right now. So most of the times I was finding it as non-specific information, non-specific.
Yeah, exactly.
Then some point you keep growing, and some point you
So
feel.
as you said, we have to take lot many sections.
Yes,
Yes.
ideally the trend of deeper will really work here, and you should know all the entities and you will arrive. My own reporting pattern and diagnostics have changed down the lane. So now, when I used to see the melanin pigment in colon biopsies, if I was just something artificial, then melanosis coli, we encountered 2 cases of melanosis coli. Among in this 3 years of the study, 2 cases of melanosis coli. It was very interesting. So picking up the entities and categorizing into that, then I think 80% of the times, ma'am, we will land up in specific diagnosis. Can I log out?
Any more questions? Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your time and your knowledge and your experience in colonic biopsies.
Thank you so much.
Your talk was very informative. I'm very sure our PGs had a great time listening to you, and I'm sure they'll make more use out
Thank
of
you,
this.
sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And
Can
I
I
request Dr.
So that I'll be comfortable
Shraddha
to
Pawar,
talk.
ma'am, to deliver her vote of thanks.
Yeah. So on behalf of the Department of Pathology, DY Patil Medical College, Kolhapur. Yeah. I, Dr. Vishrabha Pawar, am here to deliver vote of thanks. Thank you, Dr. Anita, madam, for the very lucid. It is not audible. Okay, yeah. Should I start? Yeah. On behalf of Department of Pathology, DY Patil Medical College, Kolhapur, I, Dr. Vishrabha Pawar, am here to deliver vote of thanks. Thank you, Dr. Anita, for the very lucid and informative lecture and approach towards the reporting of non-neoplastic lesions on intestine, mainly
biopsies, and discussing the very wonderful slides. You elaborated every point of the checklist to be considered during reporting. The cases and the slides discussed were also really very nice and useful. Usually these minor details are overlooked and the diagnoses are given very casually. But yes, it's very important to correlate the clinical findings properly and avoid the casual approach. I thank our Honorable President, Dr. Sanjay D. Patil Sahib, for his continuous and valuable guidance, and our Dean, respected Dr. Rakesh Sharma, for his support in making this webinar a success. I also thank the audiovisual section and the media who helped us to conduct this event successfully. Thank you again, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, everyone. Here ends the session. We close the session. Have a great day. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks for your participation and your sparing your time with us. Thank you all the participants.
Thank you.